Mr. Chairman, thanks for holding this hearing. I know how important the issues we're discussing today are to you and are to Senator Klobuchar, and for that matter, to anyone who makes their living growing food or to anyone who eats food, which most of us tend to do from time to time. The subject of today's hearing is an interesting one that deals with the unprecedented consolidation in the seed and agrochemical industry involving 5 of the so-called Big 6 companies in this field. Each of these deals raises complicated questions that deal with our antitrust and competition laws. Taken together, these deals propose rather fundamentally to reshape the agricultural industry. This hearing will help us assess the competitive risks and the corresponding benefits that may go along with those risks that these transactions may present, both on their own and collectively, examined as a whole. The Dow and DuPont transaction proposes to bring together 2 classic American companies. The companies plan to merge and then split into 3 different entities, with the agricultural company to include DuPont Crop Protection, DuPont Pioneer, and Dow AgroSciences. This new agricultural company would would combine Dow Chemical and Dow's chemical and trade expertise with DuPont's strength in germplasm and seeds, which, according to the parties, would allow for the combined entity to realize potentially significant efficiencies in research and development, and would potentially bring about a much broader range of efficiencies. ChemChina, of course, proposes to acquire Syngenta for $43 billion. Syngenta is currently the largest seller of pesticides in North America, and the deal may serve to foster sales in China and in emerging markets. I've heard repeatedly from farmers in Utah about the proposed acquisition of Syngenta by ChemChina. Should this acquisition be successful, ChemChina, owned by the Chinese government, will control one of the world's largest manufacturers and distributors of agrochemicals and pesticides. Our farmers are concerned about the effects this type of state ownership might have on the Chinese government's already stringent approval process for importation of seed traits and crops. Preferential treatment by China of Syngenta products could significantly impact competitiveness throughout the industry. However, it's also at least possible that China might improve the transparency and timeliness of its approval process if it possesses a greater stake in trait developments and the agrochemical industry. And just last week, Bayer announced an agreement to purchase Monsanto for $66 billion. This deal would allow Bayer to add Monsanto's portfolio of seed and trait products to Bayer's chemistry strength. The proposed transaction raises hard questions about all kinds of things that will need to be considered. The questions include whether the transaction would combine assets that less than 10 years ago the Department of Justice required Monsanto to divest due to the likely competitive harm that the combination would have caused. And particularly in light of the previously mentioned transactions, regulators will have to consider whether there will remain any appropriate buyer for any assets that Bayer might be required to divest if there are competitive concerns that arise during the review process. However, as with the proposed Dow and DuPont transaction, Bayer post-transaction would have expertise in chemistry, seeds, and traits, potentially allowing it to create more innovative, integrated solutions and do so in a far more efficient manner. As with any merger, the relevant antitrust inquiry under the Clayton Act is whether the effects of any deal, any one of these deals, quote, may be substantially to lessen competition or tend to create a monopoly, close quote. And while each of the proposed transactions will be investigated individually, the context of these deals taking place concurrently is also very important for us to consider during our discussions today. The seed industry is vital, not just to our nation's farmers, but also to each individual consumer. And I don't just mean each individual consumer of seeds or of agrochemicals, but consumers of the products that these products in turn help to produce. My office has heard many complaints about the potential anti-competitive harms that these deals may cause, may bring about if they're fully consummated. These concerns include the loss of head-to-head competition, particularly in the corn, soybean, and cottonseed markets, reduced incentives and ability to innovate, foreclosure of competing agricultural companies from access to necessary inputs, such as germplasm and traits, and restricted access to some foreign markets. On the other side of the ledger are the companies and other deal proponents' claims of new efficiencies and an increase in research and development through more streamlined processes combining a wide array of areas of expertise, which would be both welcome developments in a sector that has been, both of these things rather, would be welcome developments in this sector, a sector that has been hurt by all kinds of economic conditions, including low commodity prices in recent years. And so it's an industry that in that respect could potentially really benefit from the economies of scale that could be brought about through these transactions. These deals are complicated, and the nature of the antitrust inquiry is necessarily very fact-intensive, particularly when you're dealing with very large transactions like these. So I look forward to hearing from and engaging with each of our witnesses regarding these issues. Finally, I think it's important to note, to mention specifically here that while the final determination regarding the competitive impact of these deals will be made ultimately by the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission, the Judiciary Committee and the Subcommittee on Antitrust can make a valuable contribution to the conversation by closely examining the competitive concerns and looking at what other factors, what other forces or market realities may be driving consolidation within the agricultural industry. We will, if necessary, return to any topics that require additional exploration in a subsequent hearing held by the Antitrust Subcommittee. But for now, I look forward to hearing from each of our esteemed witnesses and to the productive discussion that will undoubtedly ensue as a result. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks to all